So Ivaylo, Kastchiev, you just presented a very interesting report, a WAREG report about water tariff regulation in Europe. What are the main conclusions? Do we have a common framework in Europe?
Yes, thank you for this question. What we see is that water regulation is organized very, very different way in all the countries that are in the European Union. We have some general requirements in the Water Framework Directive, but then the pricing policies, the pricing strategies, the organization of the cost structure, everything is done in a very different way, starting from the authority that is responsible for tariff analysis and tariff approval. So we have cases of national authorities responsible. We have a lot of cases of local regulation. In some cases there is a national institution responsible for ex post control of this process. And then we have very different cases of the tariff structure, about the tariff components included in the tariff, about analysis and approach of different costs that should be allowed under the tariff, whether return on invested capital is included as a financial stimulus for the companies. Investments are treated in a different way, the asset useful life is treated in a different way, the demand is treated quite differently. So what we see is that as water being a local business, this is not a cross-national sector, so it is not regulated by the European legislation so strictly as energy, as transportation, which this leaves a lot of flexibility of the countries how to deal with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if you're interested by this, you've got plenty of details in this report that will be put online on the FSL website. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the effect of developing water and sewerage infrastructure on early life mortality is not always the one intended. I specifically find that the development of sewerage systems increases early life mortality. So basically, more sewerage projects can kill children. And you might be wondering, how can this development of an infrastructure be so detrimental for the health of children? So what I find is basically that there is a really high prevalence of mid-construction abandonment and delays, which generates a large number of unfinished sewerage projects. Unfinished sewerage projects pose hazards to the population. In order to install sewerage systems, extensive excavations are required, which open ditches that get filled with stagnant water and become pools of infection. And also, large building sites entail disordered traffic diversion into previously quiet residential areas where children are used to roam freely. And finally, in order to install sewerage pipes, water cuts are needed, which forces the population to rely on unsafe sources of water and affect their sanitation practices. And what I conduct is basically a study relying on the fact that there was a large diffusion of sewerage infrastructure in Peru between 2005 and 2015, pushed by the National Sanitation Plan. And I collect several sources of administrative data and rely on econometric techniques in which I find specifically that an additional unfinished sewerage project increases early life mortality by 6% over baseline level. And this increase is driven by an increase in waterborne diseases as well as accidents. And I find that the water cuts are specifically forcing the population to rely on unsafe sources of water, decrease their use of on-site sanitation facilities, and increase the prevalence of unsafe sanitation practices. So the results of this investigation are really relevant for policy making. And basically this is because in order to understand the cost-benefit analysis of large infrastructure projects, we have to look at the implementation phase, and we have to take into account the social cost as well as the private costs.
So investments in water-related infrastructure in Europe is a critical issue for a number of reasons. One is that Europeans have long benefited from infrastructure that's already there, but over the years and decades, there has not been sufficient investment to maintain that infrastructure, so a lot of that infrastructure is aging. You also see population growth, you have economic growth that creates new demands for infrastructure to deliver services. And you also see emerging issues like climate change, which is putting more pressure on water resources, which is resulting in more droughts, more floods. This also increases investment needs. And you also see contaminants of emerging concerns, so pollutants which have not been regularly treated in the past are merging in drinking water and gaining the attention of policymakers. So for all of these reasons, investing in water infrastructure is very important to deliver the economic, environmental, and social benefits that Europeans expect. So OECD undertook some recent analysis looking at investment needs and financing capacities for water-related investments in Europe. And one of the dimensions of that work looked at whether or not tariffs charged to water users actually fully recover the costs related to those investments. And what we found is that in most cases, there is not full cost recovery from tariffs, but countries use a combination of revenues from tariffs with revenues from public budgets, and sometimes a bit of commercial finance as well to meet investment needs. This is an area you see wide heterogeneity across different countries, so you see very different situations in different countries, some of which are closer to having a fuller cost recovery from users and some which are very far away from that objective.
WAREG, the European Association of Water Regulators, is the unique European association by public authorities with responsibilities for setting rules, economic rules for water and wastewater sector. WAREG is based in Milan by the Italian Authority for Energy, Network and Environment. The organization was established in 2014 and it gathers more than 30 European Union countries and European Union neighboring countries, and it covers more than 200 million of water consumers all around Europe. Our General Assembly meets 3 or 4 times per year to discuss themes developed by our research task forces concerned on economic issues, water governance, innovations, circular economies and sustainability. Our Secretariat is the heart of the association and it coordinates the activity and the life of the association, developing our external and institutional communication. The mission of WAREG is to improve a dialogue with the European Commission and the European institutions in order to promote the role that regulation can exert to deploy at a national level the target and the target set by the European policies. The last December was held in Rome the first forum for regulation of water sector promoted by WAREG, and this forum involved more than 50 speakers coming from all around Europe and more than 200 participants for only one day of conference. During the conference rose the important role that water regulation could exert to promote and deploy the targets set by European policies, such as the one that New Green Deal will set for the future.